I got an email from W Motors. The Lykan Hypersport build from the Fast and the Furious Live crash car is going fantastically. More importantly, how is it going with regard to the pandemic? Obviously, there's a bit of a lockdown. So what I'm currently doing is using this opportunity, stripping it down and getting everything started and settled so that I can do videos and connect with students and teach remotely. So we're hoping that all the students in the second wave will be able to come here very soon, the beginning of May, and then we keep rocking out. But the project has progressed along in relation to getting the overall basis going on, connecting with some sponsors, getting the parts we need, and getting everything ready so when the students are here, we can just hit the ground running. Because as of right now, with the absolute most minor of skeleton crew, I've only been able to do so much, and with one of the students, so that we can create the videos and teach while it's going. With regard to the Boxer itself, the strip down generally goes rather easy. Most of that stuff bolts off. You can remove the entirety of the interior. You do, of course, have to drill out all of the spot welds on things like the quarter panels, the rocker panels, a lot of metal. And then going even further than that, we actually had to cut off, and you might even be able to see behind me, the chassis with the nose on it back there. You actually have to shave off a lot of metal, i.e. just straight cut it. So it will never be a Boxster again. It's absolute down to its bare minimum of the unibody with regard to what I'm calling the frame rails, which is the box section with the internal fins of the unibody and creating that. Of course, the people that are following along on my own personal channel, I'm updating every week, and the people there have seen the car initially get torn down, cut in half, and the initial welding happening with one student, Tyler, so we can create those videos, which is going very, very well. So a couple of things that are important with thinking when you create a new chassis and you've cut apart sections of a purposefully existing vehicle to build something new, how do you do that? One, how do you get the new chassis in line in the proper way without massive jigs and all kinds of complicated, serious things? Because everybody has their own opinion on how to do it. But it's actually very simple. The chassis, the unibody on the Boxer has straight box sections on the side, which were dead straight. So effectively, when you cut it in half and section it, all you have to do is make sure that those things are still laser straight in line and that the distance is the distance that you need to stretch it. The Boxer chassis actually had to be stretched just over 8 inches to be correct for this, i.e. the new wheelbase of what we used with the Porsche has got to be over 8 inches longer. So getting that straight is very important. And then you have to think about how you're building the structure. So one, it's strong in creating a longer subsection like that. So no way are you making it weaker. By nature, it will have more, it'll have more flexibility because it's longer. But then, of course, that's made up for by creating a closed cockpit car and all the structure that goes above. So the vehicle that we're creating in the future will actually be more torsionally rigid than a Boxster was, even though it's longer. In regard to stretching it, basically you just need to keep those laser straight so that the car isn't off this way, it's not off on a twist, and it's not off this way, or any combination of all of those things. So it really just comes down to precision measuring. We had the car sitting on its actual tires, and then from there we can simply shim things. Honestly used wooden popsicle sticks on wood blocks and such to get everything into place. And then simply you constrain it with metal where it is, you measure it, you eyeball it, you make sure everything's perfect, you have the correct stretch you need, so to speak. You have the new sections in the proper point in space. And then from there, you use smaller steel tubes that can be removed later or they can stay inside the frame. And then you weld the two sections together with this new tiny, like spindly framework so it's constrained and held. Once it's constrained that way, it's very easy to simply create the new sections of sheet metal, box sections, and all the bends you need to do and weld that in place. When you're welding, that's very important because obviously you're pouring a lot of heat into the metal and you're changing the crystalline structure of the metal, or the metallurgy right there. And for anybody that's been around racing cars long enough knows, or like if you've ever installed tubular headers, they always crack right next to the weld, because that's generally where it'll fail because all the heat that goes into it changes it. This is harder, this is thicker, and that's where they crack. So in doing the chassis, the general sheet metal work of the floor creates some strength, and that's not real worrisome. You basically just weld it. But the box sections of the center area, as well as the frame rails, it was important, and we did in multiple sections. There's some internal fins, and then there's multiple sections that go around it, some that are longer than others, so that as it's welded in a sort of zigzag pattern like this to focus the heat into different areas. If you just welded it perfectly all the way around, you're creating effectively a structurally weak point, which we didn't want to do. So as of right now, that's actually finished. The lower unibody is structured. So now we effectively have the platform. And I'm really hoping this lockdown gets lifted in the next number of days so we can get the rest of the students in it and keep going like that. But by no means is that such a triumphant thing. There's so much further to go. Even when the actual body is relatively constrained and in place, there's still a monumental amount of work that has to be done. Everything from creating new taillights and headlights and to proper hinge structures of the doors and latches and glass and interior and everything. But something fantastically interesting that I don't think anybody realizes. Because everybody says, why don't you just create something tube frames from scratch? Why don't you do something with a different engine? Why did you use a Porsche Boxster? The reason is simple. The actual Lykan Hypersport is hugely based upon Porsche components. The truth of the matter, the actual Boxster front section, the bulkheads, the trunk area, perfectly matches what the Lykan was. So much so that the hood on the Lykan, the trapezoidal shaped relief on the inside of the hood for where the weather stripping of the Lykan trunk matches up is literally exactly the same as the Boxster. It literally goes in the same place. The trunk of a Lykan Hypersport is the same trunk as a Boxster. Those bulkheads are effectively the same because it's so hugely based upon Porsche. And frankly, we didn't know this before we started off. We knew it was like largely Porsche based, and it had a flat six mid-engine engine with twin turbos, and it was roof, and it was based around perhaps a roof CTR3. But we didn't really realize that the front Porsche bulkheads, certain things would line up so perfectly. You can't just simply put the body on, but because it's Porsche based, the same way all of the original Lykan Hypersports are, a lot of things fit. For instance, the windshield on the Lykan Hypersport is at a much different rake than the Boxster. The Boxster's a lot more up and down. The Lykan is a lot more like this. Well, one of my greatest hopes in doing this project was that the general dashboard area and all the complex systems within of the Boxster would be very similar to the Lykan. So effectively, we wouldn't have to move the bulkheads and all that stuff to a different location in relation to the front wheels. Turns out, not only is it similar, the extension area that came with it of the dashboard for the Lykan, the lower part that goes under the windshield, exactly perfectly matches up with the leading edge of the Boxster. So if here's your Boxster windshield right here, and your Boxster dash is underneath like this, okay, but the Lykan windshield will come out here, that means there's like a dead zone, a negative here you'd have to build. There's a piece right here that fits perfectly in place. It's literally, the Lykan Hypersport is literally a Porsche dash underneath there. None of those things have changed. If you look carefully at the Lykan Hypersport, there's some of the 3 pedals, has all the same pedals, the shifter's in the same place, the key's in the same place, the lights are in the same place, a lot of the switches are the same, and it's super duded up with techie stuff, but it's the same Porsche stuff underneath. Even the seats of the Lykan Hypersport, if you look carefully at the side of them and the back and the shape and all the controls on them, it's the same stuff as what was literally in the Boxster and some of the 911s. It's just totally reupholstered and reconfigured in the way it seats. So when you look carefully at the airbags and the controls, they're the same. So we could literally take our Boxster seats, totally take all of the upholstery off and all of the structure inside and recreate all that on the frame with the airbags and everything intact and make Lykan Hypersport seats. There were some other great things relating to the build and the bodywork that made us feel good other than just the hood and the frontal part of the dash in terms of fitting. But really the center section, which would be the surrounds of the doors and the roof, those all fit really nicely too, effectively. And the exact inner width of the, shall we say, the inner part of the door jambs of the Lykan Hypersport. Can't just like glue it on or something by any means, but it's within the ballpark enough that we will be able to execute the final product beautifully, regardless of what we choose to do with the final product of the output of motor or the rear suspension. It's going to be beautiful. I mean, this by no means is some ragtag custom or kit car. This is genuinely a continuation of the Lykan Hypersport. This body is not, it's not a copy, it's an actual Lykan Hypersport body. They just chose to use glass fiber composites instead of carbon fiber. So the weight is up a microscopic amount and the strength is down slightly, but it's a beautiful structurally integral body of a supercar, hypercar that can be driven at speed. And we are basing it off of the same incredible componentry that they initially started with, a lot of, this Porsche componentry, all that development from Stuttgart. and building this to a high level of standards. So I'm terribly excited about it. I think it's going to be great. And frankly, I think it's going to represent the Fast and the Furious franchise, but most especially W Motors very well. Which brings me to probably the most interesting topic of conversation and debate of this entire build. And everybody's saying, when is a cease and desist going to come? And when is the hammer going to drop? And of course, before starting this build, I did my due diligence, and Ed and I really realized that we can of course do this build and everything's great. But surely it would be a lot nicer if you had great relationships out there in industry. And on that note, I got an email from W Motors. It actually ended up in my junk mail folder, so I didn't see it for a few days. But I thought I would just read it to you and tell you all the final thought of W Motors on this. And it says in the subject, W Motors and Genius Garage. And it writes, and they write, "Good morning, Casey. First of all, may I take this opportunity to wish you a happy Easter and to introduce myself as the relationship manager here at W Motors. We recently came to learn about the project you have embarked on with the Lykan stunt car from Furious 7, and we're excited at the thought of this being brought to life by yourself and your team. As I'm sure you are aware, W Motors is based in Dubai, UAE, and we currently have not only the original Lykan Hypersport prototype, but also a stunt car that was used during the filming of Furious 7. With this in mind, if there is any information or support you would like as you work through this project, we would be only too happy to help. Good luck and feel free to keep in touch. Best regards, from the relationship manager at W Motors in Dubai." Which is a breath of fresh air. I bet you there's some other supercar manufacturers out there that would not be so kind and welcoming to everybody being a part of their world. But I am so touched that one, they think what we're doing is, I'm sure that is complementary to the incredible art, craftsmanship, and the legacy they've already created with the Lykan Hypersport and the Fenrir. And from W Motors had contacted me and reached out because they saw what I was doing with Genius Garage and actually was interested in potentially hiring students. But it's exciting that people in the United Arab Emirates from such an incredible car company, that's so stratospherically high, can still be so in touch with people in reality. And it just makes me more excited to continue with this build and the students and connecting all that. Certainly I would love the opportunity to get over there with Dubai with some of the students, check out the prototype, the other filming car, and I'm sure there could be some great photo opportunities and whatnot. But at the very least, I look forward to continue this forward. I think they're all going to be very proud with what we do. I hope you guys keep watching on VINwiki. Check out the rest of the build and the details on my channel, and I think it's going to be great, you guys.
We are living in some strange economic times, and Premier is here to help you use those circumstances to buy your dream car. They have a simple lease program that makes it easier than ever to buy your dream car. They do financing for vintage and exotic cars. I've used them in the past, and I absolutely love Mitch and his team over there. So be sure to contact them before you go shopping to understand and get pre-approved for whatever your buying power is. That way you can go to the dealers, go to the private sellers, and make a very qualified but perhaps a little bit insulting offer.